Today we'll discuss cyberculture and how cyberculture has changed and shaped what we call as the larger discourse of popular cultural studies. It is also an integral part of cultural studies, and basically it is a part of subcultures, though no longer subculture may come from the dominant culture or as in opposition to dominant culture, and therefore these boundaries have started to blur. So let's understand what cyberculture is and why is it important in times of mass media. Now cyberculture serves as, or it is known uh, or to be included as, the networked, electronic and wired cultures in the last 3 decades of the 20th century. So, it is important to note that how from the last 3 decades of the 20th century now to the 21st century, how it has become or metamorphosized. Now, the other terms which are used instead of cyberculture is internet studies, new media studies, digital media studies, digital culture studies, networked culture studies, information society studies and contemporary media studies. So, it has multiplicity of other names, but everything under cyberculture can also come under these topics or the terms as well. Now, cyberspace is also often called, or as it can be defined, as a set of relations and actions in the electronic space or technospace. Now, with emerging technology, emerging studies, the terminologies are also getting a different name and a different setting. Now, we know places like cyberspace. What are these cyberspaces? And is it different from what they are calling as techno spaces? So, ultimately technology has to do with cyber or cyber culture, and therefore it can be interchangeably used. It is defined as new social space. Now, what is a social space? Where people go, talk to each other, perform the duties that are meant for the society. Now, those places or spaces are now being defined by cyberculture. So, cyberculture has become the new social space where people go interact with each other. They also share ideas and so on and so forth. The cyberculture has defined by the Encyclopedia of Media as cultures formed in or associated with online social spaces. So, the new social spaces is nothing but the online social spaces. So, people are eating in social media, people are drinking in social media, people are going on vacation in social media, everything in and around social media. Without that, it seems as if no life is worth living. So, when we talk about these online social spaces and why they have become or why they are being called as online social spaces, we see whatever one does in one's life, as in reality, is also happening in the virtual reality. So, therefore, it is almost as if people are living in that virtual space, doing everything that can be performed in the other social spaces. These cyber cultures are formations. Formations of what? Formations which is linked to and embedded in material contexts and conditions. So, there is production happening, there is expansion happening and also application happening. Now, the cyber culture entails a lot of things. It is deeply embedded in material contexts and conditions, and how in the nature of cyberspace we see it is meant to produce, it is meant to expand and it is meant to apply. The same thing happens with any other social space. We produce emotions, we produce products, we produce relationships and we expand them. and in our day to day life we also apply certain things from our social spaces. So is cyber culture doing. This means that we need to see cyber culture as any other cultural process. Now it has come to a point where any other means can be seen as cyber culture or as any other culture, process, event structure, positioning and representing, is usually influencing and affecting race, class, gender, sexuality, identity and other particular ways. Now if we say that how is it happening? Now what is getting affected, or how this affectation is taking place of race, class, gender, sexuality, etc. Now through these cyber cultural spaces, one is able to exercise their freedom, or suppose if they are talking about queer identities, right, it has become a place where you can go and find community of people who belong to the same race, people who belong to the same class, gender, and it's happening globally in a more transnational way. It is not limited to the particular nation or geography. Cyberculture studies extend the work of cultural criticism and cultural studies by locating cyber cultures as affected by and affecting these actual identities of individuals. So they are, in the larger study of cyber culture studies, we see how cultural criticism is working, and it is also locating cyber cultures as affected by and affecting these actual identities of individuals. Now we often see that people have now two kind of personalities: the personality which is in the virtual life or in virtual spaces like social media, and a life in reality. So how is it affecting the identities? That is what they are trying to discuss. Now cyber cultures are driven by material considerations of profit and power. Unlike any other culture, as it says that it is unlike any other culture, which is also driven by material conditions of profit and power, because a society cannot function without economy or without finances, and for that it also needs a certain amount of authoritative power. And if we are discussing these material conditions which are considerations of the profit and power, we further see that technology must always be seen as contextual and treated as technocultural, where meanings, values and functions are integrally associated with the object. Now if there is an object which you buy, how are you associating or integrating your meanings, your values and functions with that? That is what they are trying to say. So let us say for example, there is a smartphone, and that smartphone is a device, but in different other cultures it may not just be a device. So for every other community or society, that particular smartphone may have a different value. So for example, for someone a smartphone is a status quo. For some it could be a tool for education because they use their phones to study. So for some community or some group of people, it acts as a tool. For others it could be way to connect, which is more like value and need. So they are connecting with their loved ones. So that is how the technoculture is getting where the meanings which is out there, the value, the function, integrating, associated with the subject, with the object. Now cyberculture emerges in the context of large scale movements of people, miscegenation of culture leading to hybridized forms, dispersed forms of production, and we see that the widespread flow of capital is also happening. This capital is increasing and it is moving to control the production and circulation and consumption. So again it brings us to Marx and also to the market. how production, consumption, commodity are related, and it helps to control ultimately. Now, a very good example of how they are bringing in these large scale movements of people and of culture leading to hybridization of forms. Now, again, in any culture, no culture is pure. If we talk about Bhaba's theory of hybridization, we see every culture is affected. It might have been in a latent state for a very long period of time, but it is not possible that a culture has not been affected at all. So, some integration has happened, and here also they are talking about these hybridization of forms. Now, one example is of e-commerce company, where we see it involves large scale human movements and its integration with cultures. So, how these large scale movements are getting integration with other cultures, and it leads to a need of greater connectivity and control, shaping the digital landscape. How we are kind of bringing in these large scale movements. Now, the key concerns in cyberculture studies. So, first, if we talk about, we have globalization, technocapitalism and cybercultures. Now, we know what is globalization, anything which is happening on a global level. Technocapitalism is changes in capitalism association with the emergence of a new technological sector, where power of corporations and new forms of organizations come in together. Basically, you are generating capitalism through technology. And then there is cyber cultures, the kind of culture or movement around culture happening in the cyberspaces. Globalization has been enabled by the advent of high speed communication, and then we see capitalism is increasingly becoming techno-capitalism. Without technology, you cannot generate capital anymore. It is coming to such a stage because the distributed nature of production, marketing and consumption demands technological linkages to synchronize 24/7. So, we need this technology to generate what we call as capitalism, which has now becoming techno-capitalism. Without these usage of tools and technologies and communication, it is not possible. Manuel Castells has demonstrated how the flows of information assume prime importance in this context. And it is the management of information and financial flows that become the key focus in globalized techno-capitalism. So, how you manage information? Is your information at your dispersal? Is it getting disposed? It is getting retained. How are you managing that information? That is the question. And this information wholly solely is data driven nowadays, and how the financial flows are working. So, these are the key concerns in cybercultural studies. Now, the materiality and what we call as corporeality is very interesting to note. In this study of cybercultures, we see a lot of interesting nodes that are coming in, and people are studying, which also tells us about the studies of cyberculture by Howard, where he says that celebrate virtual worlds for enabling the user to transcend geography and the body. Now, this virtual world or cyberculture or technology has led us to use something which is technology to transcend geography and the body. Now, how is this happening? How is it possible in reality? So, we see when he says transcend the geography and the body, he is talking about the remote work. So, nowadays people are at home and they are transcending in that space as it is your home, but you are making it as an office, you are transcending as a professional sitting at your home. And that remote work is what he is talking about, transcending geography. And what about body? Same. If we talk about MOOC courses, you are not sitting in a classroom right now. You are not sitting in a classroom and the learning is not happening in the classroom, but the learning is happening. So, on the virtual level, you are joining in from some other place, right? And you are using technology to learn, and therefore, your body at that point of time seems as if you are in a classroom and it transcends. So, the learners from different places come together. The other example nowadays is called tech medicine. People are getting consultancies with doctors or consultation with doctors via virtual modes. So, the doctor will examine, will listen to your problems, and after listening to the problem, he will consult and tell you what the problem is. So, that is also happening on this transcendence of geography and the body. Now, cyberculture studies explores the impact, consequences, context, manifestations of computer technology and ICTs on the social, cultural, economic, material, fleshly conditions of real bodies. This is very interesting because in times to come, we will be talking about the impact of cyberculture studies or the usage of technology and its consequences, not just on the material, not just on the economy, but also on our real bodies. What is the long lasting effect? For say example, if we are very long hours, we are looking at a screen or we are working on laptop, it leads to poor eyesight. And it also leads to backache because we are constantly sitting. So, these long hours are in a way adversely affecting our body. So, they have to see other effects on the real bodies and examine the shifts in the nature of living for material bodies via ICTs and new media. Now, with the coming of AI, we also now are looking into how they are going to situate it in robots. For example, a robot is made to sit and speak in on behalf of you, right? So, how they will be using these material bodies and the conditions of the real body, the impact, long lasting impact, that will be the interesting study to look at. And then comes the digital divide in cyberculture studies. The term is used to describe the uneven nature of access to and the quality of internet access, electronic communication and cybercultures in general. So, what are these uneven nature of access? How are you accessing? Is it ethical? So, these are few of the things that they talk about. You download a film from torrent. People are using what they call as these Microsoft Office, which are pirated, right? So, what is this uneven nature of the access and the quality of internet access? Are you getting broadband? What is the bandwidth? What is this internet speed? So, these all will be studied in the digital divide. And who are these people who have access to all this? Who are the people who don't have the access to all this, and what are the reasons? It gestures primarily at the difference in digital cultures, including production and dissemination and the use between first world and third world. Now is the real question, how this digital divide is evident in first world countries and third world countries, or as they can put, in the developing nations and the developed nations. So, we have to wait and see for such studies to come up sooner in order to finally come to a conclusion. Now, Pippa Norris suggests 3 layers of this digital divide. And what are these 3 layers? One is the global divide, referring to the divergence of internet access between developed and developing nations. Again, coming from the previous one, where they are talking about the third world and the first world countries. And then we see the social divide, which is referring to the divergence between internet access users and between classes and section with a particular society termed information rich and information poor. Now, people who do not have internet, and till 2018 India was still one of the less internet user country. Maybe after the pandemic it might have increased with coming of other more cheaper networks. So, we see that with this particular divide or term that they use, information rich and information poor, when one asks you, did you hear about this or did you see this viral video or meme, and the other one responds as, no, I did not. You see the digital divide as to, you did not, oh, it went viral. The other one who did not is the person who is information poor, the one who has is information rich. But on the other, it could also be the social divide, because some informations only circulate in the urban, some only in the semi-urban, so it does not reach the rural. So, that information rich and poor debate is still consistent between classes and sections. The democratic divide, referring to the difference in nature, quality of use of internet and digital resources between users. Now, everyone might not be getting that bandwidth. Everyone might not have broadband. People might still be using their phone data. So, that is the democratic divide that they are talking about. Everyone is not having that kind of materiality of internet or digital resources. And under the third point, we have the emphasis on the political economy of ICTs. Now, political economy we discussed under advertisements, and we see that how the ideology of maybe the nation state kind of reflects in these advertisements in order to make more money. So, whatever the mainstream is about, they bend their ideologies likewise and therefore generate more money, because it is liked by most of the population, and which ultimately leads to political economy. But we see political economy also coming in ICTs, pays attention to the issues of power and justice, social agenda and political consequences of ICTs. So, what are the political consequences of ICTs? Now, each political party is coming up with something called IT cell, and there we see the political consequences or usage of ICTs, and also in issues related to power, justice and social agenda, where again the idea of activism comes through digital spaces. And there is cybercultural studies call attention to be raised, gendered and classed nature of the information revolution. So, this information revolution is also in ways very racist, very gender biased, and also in a way talking about classes or class differentiation. So, these studies also in ways contribute to the larger study of cyberculture, and it needs to be addressed. Further, under cultural studies, we see that cybercultures are congeries of the economic and technical and the social structure, social cultural. These cybercultures in a way are bringing together or parts of the economic, technical and socio-cultural. It involves questions of labor and finance, political control and power of individual and as a community. So, it is questioning in a way, not just involves the questions. It is questioning the labor and finances, political control and power, and of the individual and the community as well. Any study of cyberculture must address all aspects of information society. So this again, because every day we see some advancement of technology happening, the sharing of information. Initially in WhatsApp, we could share a limited number of photos in one go. So it increased. So likewise, every day some or the other technological changes are coming in cybercultures. Now through WhatsApp also you can pay money, you can use emojis, you can use GIFs. So that study of cyberculture must address all aspects, how they are using. In order to do so, approach must be eclectic and multi-sited. You cannot have a very narrow overview of the cyberculture and then do the study or approach it from a very narrow viewpoint, dealing with multiple aspects of cyberculture without sacrificing any. So, it is a challenge indeed to do cybercultural studies because of so much nuances, so many multi-sited aspects which one needs to deal with while talking about cyberculture. Though you have to be very narrow in a way how you study, taking one at a time, but again you have to consider and reconsider the other aspects. Keep in mind those and not sacrifice while you conduct the study. Now, some theorists call something as digital ethnography or anthropology. Now, we have come to a point where these studies are also being done, and it can be again put in the larger framework of cybercultural studies, because it talks about how digital ethnography is conducted, digital anthropology is conducted, or how they formulate the questions or the study, how they devise the methodology around it. Now, ethnographies of cyberspace. Now, Christine Hein says 3 key areas of studying the internet can be isolated ethnographically. One, through travel. Second, face to face, text technology and reflexivity, and making of ethnographic objects. So, these ethnographic objects are nothing but artifacts which tells you about the culture. The first calls for a redefining of what face-to-face interaction means. Now, if you are doing an ethnography in a cyberspace, of course, the person is not present. What is this face-to-face means? They might be using Google Classroom and taking the interview, or they might be using other ICT tools, Zoom, etc. That is what they are talking about. So, is it still okay to call it face to face, or how should we name it? The internet is a collection of texts, and the tasks of the ethnographer is to understand the meaning generated by these textual practices. Now, as movies act as text, advertisement, ad films add as text to us. Similarly, the internet itself is a collection of texts, and the task of the ethnographer is to understand the meaning generated by these different textual practices. Finally, the internet must be treated as a cultural artifact. So, finally, they have given the verdict that internet should be called a cultural artifact that is linked to offline relationships and context, to situate it within larger context and see how to complement each other. So, is there a possibility that the offline relationships and context will kind of complement each other or not? So, we see that there is an example where we see this, the larger contexts and offline relationships coming together. Now, the example is e-commerce company. Let's say it is Amazon, and what happens is Amazon now invites sellers. So, these small business owners are the ones who are interacting with this large context, which is e-commerce company. The online context, in the online context, what is happening? Amazon and others allow customers to buy goods from many sellers and small businessmen. That is the online context. What is the offline context? Many local businesses use Amazon like platform to reach to a broader audience. So, they are in a way using Amazon as a platform to connect to the broader offline people as well. So, that is finally what that is why it is said it acts as a cultural artifact. And in ethnographies, we see ethnographies of cyberculture as suggested by Escobar. Now, he says that there is a need to look at the ways in which software and applications are designed as well as used, and creation of online communities and networks takes place. So, he is saying that because it is an ethnography study and you need involvement of people, like not monitors but people, humans, we need to look at ways in which the software and applications are designed and how it is used, and also how it creates the online communities and networks. So, earlier this networking used to happen offline. How people used to connect in that way, and how is it different from how people are connecting today? So, even if we try to do a study, the ethnography study of the cyber culture will be entirely different from the ethnography that might have been conducted in the offline spaces. So, that will be very interesting to note. The popular culture forms of such technologies, for example, cyberpunk to computer games, the cultural identities that emerge in this new techno space, and the political economy of cyberculture, especially the relationship between capitalism, global economy and power. So, all these three dynamics are in a way coming together, and therefore, we have to wait and see how ethnographies of cyberculture will work, how it will get integrated. And lastly, an instance of such an ethnography would be London School of Economics Young People New Media project, where they are studying the use of media by young people, the individualization that results from this, and new forms of leisure, literacy and sociability. Now, because we have the time which is leisure, and how you are bringing in your literacy and also sociability to understand the young people in the new media age, which is the project that is ongoing, and other intricate or small narrow views which is encapsulated in this study or framework altogether.